back to Learn Economia. Today we are going to discuss the types of inflation based on its causes and speed. Before proceeding to our discussion in a detailed manner, it's very important to consider the roadmap of today's discussion. First of all, we will be looking onto the meaning of inflation. Then we will be seeing the types of inflation based on its causes. After that, we will be coming to the types of inflation based on its speed. And finally, we will be concluding the session. Okay. So, starting with the meaning of inflation. What is all about inflation? If you look at inflation, we will be seeing that the prices of goods and services would be increasing in the market, isn't it? So, it will be increasing in the market, and this is something that we are dealing with a sustained rise in prices. Sustained rise in prices. Okay, so prices will be rising over a period of time. Now, what will happen if the prices are increasing over a period of time? It will be definitely reducing the purchasing power of money. So, what does it mean that the purchasing power of money is increasing? You know that the prices of goods and services are increasing today compared to what we could have in the previous month or previous year. So, in this context, we need to understand that yesterday or in period 1, you were getting 1 kg of good for rupees 10. Okay, so in period 1, you were getting 1 kg of good for rupees 10. Now, in period 2, we are talking about a scenario of inflation. So, for the same reason, prices would be increasing. So, you can have two different scenarios. So, either for rupees 10, you will be getting something called less than 1 kg. Either you will be getting less than 1 kg for rupees 10. Or else, if you want to have 1 kg, you will need to get 1 kg or you will be getting 1 kg for more than rupees 10. So, either you need to go for more than rupees 10 to get 1 kg, or else you will, if you are paying only rupees 10 today, you will be getting only less than 1 kg. So what is happening? The purchasing power of money is getting down, isn't it? So you could find that the same amount of money in your pocket would be buying only lesser goods and services for you. So what will happen to the value of money? The value of money would be coming down in this context. So only when you give more money, you will be getting the same quantity of good. And if you're giving the same money, what will happen? You will be getting lesser quantity. So that is the main reason why you are saying that the value of money would be coming down or it would be diminishing. And this diminishing effect of value of money would be caused by a variety of factors. So you do have a multiple set of factors affecting the same. And we are moving on to such things here. So this is what is driving us to the types of inflation based on causes. The first type of inflation that we are having over here is called the demand pull inflation. So what is it all about demand pull inflation? So just assume that your demand for commodities are increasing. So the aggregate demand is rising. So your aggregate demand is rising due to some reason. Either your income might be increasing or else you might be getting some extra source of income, whatever it is. So anyway, your aggregate demand is increasing. Okay, whatever be the reason. Now, if the aggregate demand is increasing, you know that aggregate supply cannot be increased all of a sudden. For example, if you think about rice, if your demand for rice is increasing, the supply of rice will be remaining the same or it will be constant in a particular scenario. Because production of rice will be taking a lot of time, isn't it? So we have to consider these two things simultaneously. Aggregate demand increasing and aggregate supply would be remaining constant. So here what happens is that it automatically implies that aggregate demand would be greater than the constant aggregate supply because aggregate demand is rising. That's why this has been happening. Now what would be the implication of the same on prices? Here the prices would be increasing. Okay. So here what is happening? Supply is something that would be lesser and the demand is exceeding supply. So you do have something called an excess demand, and for the same reason prices would be increasing, and what happens is that too much money would be chasing too few goods. Okay, so as I was telling you, there would be several reasons for your aggregate demand to increase. Either money supply would be increasing in the market, money market, because the central bank would be reducing the interest rate, so people would be going to bank and take more loans, and then the money supply would be increasing. Or else what happens is that government spending will be increasing, government expenditure in the form of law, in the form of subsidy, in the form of pension. So all these things would be increasing. So whatever is the scenario, the influence on the economy would be inflation. So all these would be inflationary. Okay. All these will pump more money to the hands of people, and that is why you are increasing your demand much more. And when you have your aggregate supply taken into consideration, it's constant at a point of time, and for the same reason, simultaneous coexistence of increasing aggregate demand and constant aggregate supply would be making the prices to go up. So that is called demand pull inflation. Now you are having some other type of inflation, and this is called cost push inflation. So what is it all about, cost push inflation? So here you need to talk about the producer's perspective. We are talking about the demand pull inflation. Mostly we consider the consumer's perspective, but here we have to consider a little bit of producer's perspective here. Why? Because you know that as far as producers are concerned, they will be using a lot of things to produce the commodity. So for example, you can consider raw materials, isn't it? So raw materials, a producer will be using a lot of raw materials. He would be using something called labor, etc. for production. He might be requiring to go for transportation of his product. He might be incurring something called advertisement cost, isn't it? He might be incurring something called electricity cost for production, isn't it? So all are, so transportation cost of electricity cost of labor cost or cost for raw materials. What all are these? These are cost of production. Cost of production. So the producer will be incurring something called cost of production when he goes for producing certain commodity. Now what will happen if any of these costs increases? So if any of these cost increases, definitely that will be leading to rise in cost of production. So what will happen if cost of production for a producer in producing a particular commodity is increasing? If the cost of production is increasing, a rational producer, a producer that is a person who is intending to have something called more profit, this kind of a producer will have a tendency to shift this increase in cost of production burden to the consumer. So what he will be doing is that he would be automatically increasing the prices of the final good. The prices of the final good in this case would be increased. Why? Because this person producer, he will be passing the increased cost of production to the consumers. So either it could be an increased wage or increased energy cost or increased cost of raw materials, whatever it is, increased cost of transportation, whatever it is, this producer will be shifting the burden to the consumers. So this is just to maintain his profit margin that he is doing this. So what will be the effect here? Your prices of final goods and services would be increasing, and for the same reason we are talking about a scenario of inflation. So inflation can be also pushed by cost of production as well, which is called the cost push inflation. Okay. Now, there is something very specifically known as monetary inflation. So what is so special? So here comes a role of some body called central bank. So you know that as far as central bank is concerned, this is the apex authority in the arena of banking, isn't it? So the central bank would be using quantitative and qualitative policy tools to deal with the money supply aspect in the economy. So as more kind of effect would be caused by quantitative policy tools. So here just to consider some quantitative policy tool called interest rate. So just consider, you know that there are several interest rate kind of thing available. So you do have something called repo rate, reverse repo rate kind of thing. Okay, so here we are simply taking the case of interest rate. So what will happen if the interest rate is actually reduced? If the interest rate is reduced by the bank, there can be two impacts. One, what will happen to loan? Loan taken, people would be taking more loans, isn't it? So Because people think that the money burden here would be coming down, because why? They need to pay only less price to the bank in the form of interest. So their cost of borrowing is coming down, and for the same reason people will be going for more loans. They will take more loans. So when people are taking more loans, what will happen? More money will be coming to their hand. So what happens is that the money supply in the economy would be increasing, the money with people would be increasing. So what will happen to aggregate demand here? So money supply as well as money with people. Money with people. So both these would be increasing, isn't it? So what will happen to aggregate demand here? The aggregate demand automatically rises again. Remember, this go along with the constant aggregate supply. So what would be the effect? Price will be increasing. Now, the other side here is that, when interest rate is coming down, what will happen to savings? People will think that if they save more in the form of deposits, they will be getting only lesser interest rates. So they think that there is something called an opportunity cost, isn't it? So saving would be coming down. Again, what will happen to money with people? Money with people again would increase. Money with people, this again would increase. Now again, what will happen to aggregate demand? The aggregate demand is increasing. So remember, here also you need to consider aggregate demand increasing and aggregate supply remaining the same. Okay. So what will be the implication? Price will be increasing. So what is that? It is inflation. So this is called monetary inflation, which is happening due to increase in money supply in the economy. Okay. Now, we are moving on to another type of inflation that is based on causes, and this is called built-in inflation. So what is it all about, built-in inflation? So here comes the role of something called expectations. Expectations. So we know that we are living a life in the presence of uncertainty. So you do not know your future completely, right? We cannot predict our future with 100% accuracy. So we might be making errors, mistakes, and so on. Why? Because there is still a risk component. So there can be a chance of losses. So here what happens is that why we are taking this expectation into consideration is that people in the presence of some current level of inflation, they will expect that inflation will be again continuing in the future. Okay. So for example, take the case of present. So in the present scenario, there is inflation. Already there is inflation. Again, if you look at past, in the past also there was some rate of inflation. In the present, when it reached, the rate of inflation was increasing much more. So what will be your expectation for future? So in the future also you might be thinking about inflation. So you expect more inflation in the future. So inflation in the past, it was little. So this was little, and here in the present you could find that more inflation, and in the future for the same reason you will be expecting much more inflation, much more. So when you expect much more inflation, what will be your demand? As a labor, you will be trying to demand more wages. Why? Because you think that in future, the present wages, if it continues, it will not be anything for you to meet your daily needs and wants. So you might be requiring more wages, more money to deal with your expected level of inflation. So what happens is that your demand for wages would be increasing. Demand for wages in this scenario will be increasing due to expected inflation. So why this is increasing? This is increasing due to expected inflation. So it is expected inflation for future that is making demand for wages to increase. So when demand for wages increases, what happens is that if there are labor union asking for wages, definitely wages will be increasing. Otherwise, there will be a clash between the company and the labor union. So wage will increase, isn't it? So wage will increase. Now, when wage increases, what will happen to aggregate demand? Aggregate demand again increases. And aggregate demand again increases means what will happen to inflation? Inflation rate again increases because the prices are again increasing due to increase in aggregate demand. So this will again stimulate more wages. Now again you could find that demand for wages increases because people expect more inflation. Okay. So this will increase because people will be expecting more inflation. So this is a wage price spiral that will be happening. So it will go in a circular motion, or it will be a kind of cycle that you can have, a wage price spiral. Okay. Now we are moving on to next type of inflation, and this is called supply shock inflation. So what is so special about supply shock inflation? This is also a type of inflation based on cost. The supply shock inflation means that there will be something called reduction in supply. So what happens is that the quantity supplied of a commodity, quantity supplied. So this will be coming down. So what will happen when the quantity supplied is coming down, at the same time demand remaining the same? So here aggregate demand will not be having any change. Either it will be increasing or else aggregate demand will remain the same. But the problem here is that this will coexist with the aggregate supply coming down. So why is this aggregate supply coming down? Aggregate supply can come down due to some war, something called geopolitical events. You might be knowing about the kind of Ukraine-Russia war and the problems that happened with respect to oil and all. So there was something related to an oil shortage, oil crisis kind of scenario that happened for at least for some period of time, that was driving the prices up, isn't it? Again, if there is something called flood in an agricultural area, so what will happen? There would be a crop loss, and for the same reason, there would be a shortage in supply. Aggregate supply would be coming down. What will happen? So if there is just in one particular area, there is a crop loss or crop damage, that might not be that much kind of impact creating incident. But if it is a kind of natural disaster that happens in an area where there is majority of the people would be engaging in agriculture, definitely that might sometimes impact aggregate supply, isn't it? Because this particular production might be impacting the whole economy, because this might be the area that might be supplying commodities for the major part of the country, means definitely aggregate supply would be coming down, right? So that again would lead to more prices. Again, it's an inflationary scenario. Now, the next type of inflation based on cost would be structural inflation. So what is it all about structural inflation? Structural inflation will be caused due to structural inefficiencies. Structural inefficiency. So what is it all about structural inefficiency? Here you have to take into consideration problems associated with transportation, problems associated with marketing, problem associated with storage of commodity, storage, and problem associated with productivity. So what will happen in these cases? If there is no proper transportation, there can be problems. If there is no possibilities of marketing, again there can be problems. If the storage facilities are not proper, definitely there would be damage of the final output. Again, if the productivity is down, again aggregate supply would be coming down. So in these cases also, you could find that there can be instance of loss of output or loss of quantity of output. So what will happen here? Also, you could have a scenario of less aggregate supply scenario here, making the prices to go up. Okay, so this is also known as bottleneck inflation because this is happening due to some inefficiency in the economy. Now, the next inflation is something that is not that much discussed in the usual scenario, and this is called protein inflation. Again, we are talking about inflation based on causes. So what happens is that just assume that your income is increasing. Your income is increasing. So when your income increases, what happens is that you might be thinking like this. Okay, now my income is a good income, a good amount of income. So what I need to do from now onwards is that I have to keep a check on my diet. So I have to include certain nutritious food items in my diet. I need to include some vitamin supplements. I need to include some protein supplements, etc. in my diet. So what happens is that as a result of increase in income, you think that you need to take more focus onto your diet. So you will be more health conscious. So you will focus onto your diet, and you will spend more for your diet requirements. Here your expenditure on diet-based items would be increasing. So what is happening? So actually your demand for these items have increased. your rather than expenditure, you can talk about demand. It is this demand that will be driving to expenditure, isn't it? So now your demand for diet-based items are increasing. What will happen to the prices of diet-based items? The prices of these items will be increasing. Okay, so it's a kind of change in dietary habits of population that will happen as a result of rise in their income. So now people can include more items like protein, vitamin supplements, etc. in their diet, and they will be making more demand of more demand for these products, making its prices to go up, and this is called protein inflation. Now, we have discussed a lot of types of inflation based on causes. Now it's a time to consider the types of inflation based on speed. The first type of inflation that we are having over here is called creeping inflation. So what is it all about creeping inflation? You might have heard and seen creepers, isn't it? So what happens is that it will just move very slowly, isn't it? So for the same reason, what happens is that the rate of inflation would be very slow. Rate of growth of inflation, rate of growth of prices, or rate of rise in prices. This would be slower, and it will be also gradual. So what happens is that annually, if you take, it will be rising less than 3%. But if you look at this mild inflation or low inflation or creeping inflation, what happens is that you could find that this much of inflation is something that is good for the economy. So this is required. This is something needed for the economy. Why? Because you can manage it. And this is something that would be stimulating demand. Why? Because just think that prices are increasing. Okay. So when prices are increasing in a context where aggregate demand increases and aggregate supply remaining the same, what will happen over a period of time? So this is what is leading to prices in this particular scenario. Aggregate demand increasing and aggregate supply constant. So this is what is leading to prices. Now what will happen over a period of time? Over a period of time, people would be preferring to increase aggregate supply because here you need more investment, isn't it? Then only aggregate supply would be increasing. So investment will increase. Production and output. Production or output. Output. So what will happen to this? This will increase. What will happen to employment? Employment will increase. Employment will increase. So more resources will be made use of. More investment will happen. What will be the impact? Altogether, growth of the economy will happen. So that is why we could find that creeping or mild or low inflation is something that is good for the economy. It will be stimulating something called demand. It will be stimulating production, investment, employment, and growth, and whatnot. Now, though creeping inflation or mild inflation or low inflation is something that we need, if it is moving to a walking inflation or trotting inflation, things would be out of our hand. Why? Because here inflation will be increasing, or the rate of rate of growth in prices will be actually more than 3%. Here it might be increasing from 3% to 10% per year. So here also we are talking about annual scenario. Annually this will be happening. So if this walking inflation is not properly addressed, definitely it will be affecting the economy. It will be overheating the economy, and for the same reason what happens is that it will be creating problems, because the growth of the economy would be negatively impacted in this particular scenario. The growth might be coming down because as a result of very high inflation, that is something that you cannot tame. This will lead to some high levels of problems in the future. Because walking inflation, if it is not checked, it will lead to some other types of inflation, much more higher type of inflation. And this is called galloping inflation or hopping inflation or running inflation. So what happens here is that the prices would be increasing double or triple digit. So what will be happening? There would be a rapid rise in prices. A upward movement of prices will be happening, and this will also happen in a little difficult scenario. It will be leading to almost like an uncontrollable manner. It will be almost like 10% to 15% rate of growth in prices. Now what will be happening? It will be affecting all the sectors. So all sectors will be affected very badly. it would be leading to some bad impact. The purchasing power of people, purchasing power of money will be coming down here. So altogether there would be a problem. People will demand more wages, and again that will be leading to more inflation. So it's all about a kind of uncontrollable inflation. Okay. Now, if this galloping inflation is not tamed on time, it will lead to something very serious called hyperinflation. So if you know about what happened in Sri Lanka, something called hyperinflation happened, isn't it? So what happens is that even if you look on a month, in that month itself, inflation would be more than 50%. So what will happen to the value of the currency? The value of the currency will be coming down. So what will happen to stability? Stability will be affected badly. So stability will be affected badly. Bad impact on stability. And what will happen to people? People will be having a loss of their welfare. So welfare in this particular scenario would be coming down. People will be losing confidence in the monetary system and the central government. So everywhere there would be a bad, pessimistic, dull scenario due to this hyperinflation. Okay. So that was it all about inflation based on speed. Now we are moving on to the conclusionary part, where we could find that inflation is something that is to some extent good, but high inflation is something that would be destabilizing the economy. If you're having just a mild inflation or a creeping inflation or low inflation, so this will be stimulating aggregate demand, but if it is moving to a running, a walking inflation, definitely that will be creating problems. And if it is moving to a galloping inflation, definitely it's a complete failure of the economy. So if it is inflation, what happens is that the businesses would be having issues, individuals will be having issues because their planning would get affected. This will be affecting their expectations, and for the same reason, it will be impacting the savings, it will be impacting investment. It will definitely reduce the purchasing power, because with your available money, you won't be able to have the intended amount of goods. You need to pay more to get the intended amount of goods. So what we have to do is that we can go for some monetary policy measures, called adjusting interest rate. We can have some fiscal policy measures here. So what we have to do during the time of inflation is that interest rate can be increased from the side of monetary policy. So interest rate, if it is increased, people will be keeping more money in the form of savings in bank. So money supply would be reduced, and people will not be taking that much loan. Again, money supply will be reduced. Now, fiscal policy means tax can be increased, expenditure by the government expenditure here can be reduced. Expenditure can be reduced and to address inflation. But again, what happens is that if these things are taken into consideration, it will be affecting the welfare of people very badly. So the government should not take that much strict measures every time. Only when the government feels that inflation is completely out of control, it can go for these kind of things. Okay. So that is it all for today. Now you can download Learn Oikonomia app. I'll be giving the link of the same in the description box. So if you download it, you will be having a lot of benefits from this. You can get the previous year question papers and answer. You can get free study materials, live as well as recorded classes, and free MCQ based weekly tests. Again, you can be a part of a free Telegram community. I'll be provided the link of this as well in the description box. So that is all for today. You can like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more videos. Thank you.